The night was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that makes every small sound feel louder than it should. James parked his car outside his house, the dim glow of the streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. Tonight was supposed to be different. He wasn't coming home alone. He was with her, his secret, the woman who had whispered promises and stolen moments that no one else knew about. But as he approached the front door, something felt off. That uneasy feeling settled deep in his chest, the kind that warns you something is about to shatter your world. He pushed the door open, expecting the familiar warmth of his home, the faint scent of dinner or the soft glow of the living room lamp. Instead, the sight that met his eyes froze him in place. There in the middle of the room was a man, shirtless, unashamed, and completely at ease in a space that James had always considered private, untouchable. The man wasn't hiding, he wasn't sneaking. He was just there like he belonged. The air grew heavier, the silence almost unbearable. James felt the ground shift beneath him, not physically, but in a way that made everything he thought he knew feel fragile and uncertain. His heart pounded, a mix of rage and disbelief twisting together. This wasn't about him walking in on something ordinary, something explainable. No, this was something else entirely, something that crossed a line he hadn't even realized existed. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the scene, trying to figure out why his wife would let a stranger exist so casually in their home, yet his anger was already rising before any words could form. Every second stretched, thick with tension, and in that moment, he didn't pause to question, didn't look for reasons or excuses. He acted, driven by instinct and a surge of emotions he barely controlled. The woman beside him, the one he thought he could trust to understand his world, reached for him, maybe to calm him, maybe to explain. But the sight of her, the look in her eyes, only added fire to the storm brewing inside him. He could see it, the confusion, the fear, the hesitation, but it didn't matter. The moment demanded action, and he reacted before he could think. The stranger's calm, almost daring presence made the room feel smaller, the walls closing in with every heartbeat. It wasn't just about betrayal, it was about power, control, and the fragile trust that had been holding their lives together. James's mind screamed for answers, but there was only one reaction that felt possible in that charged, impossible instant. And yet, the consequences of that reaction, how it would change everything he thought he knew about his marriage, his home, and even himself, were still waiting, unknown and unavoidable. As the night stretched on, the air thick with tension, one question hung over the room like a shadow. What would come next? How would everyone face the truth once the initial shock passed? James's choices in that single explosive moment had set the stage for a chain reaction, one that would reveal secrets, test loyalties, and force every hidden truth into the light. The answers weren't coming tonight, and the suspense, the raw, human tension of betrayal and anger, was just beginning to grip them all. If you want, I can also craft a second version that is even punchier and more suspenseful, optimized for keeping YouTube viewers hooked for the next part. Do you want me to do that? James stepped back, his hand still shaking from the impulsive action he had taken. The stranger didn't flinch, didn't move. He simply met James's gaze with a look that was calm, almost unervingly confident. It was the kind of stare that made you question not just the moment, but everything you thought you understood about the people around you. James's chest heaved, the adrenaline still rushing through him, mixing with anger, fear, and confusion. How had this man even gotten inside? And why? Every explanation he tried to form in his mind seemed impossible, yet the evidence was right there, undeniable and shocking. His wife, Lisa, stood frozen near the doorway, her eyes wide and searching. James had never seen her like this, so vulnerable yet so defiant at the same time. There was a story in those eyes, a secret she hadn't shared, and now it was all coming to the surface in the most explosive way imaginable. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. In that silence, the tension grew, thicker than the walls around them, almost suffocating. James realized he had no idea who he was really facing, not just the stranger but his own wife, the woman he thought he knew completely. The stranger finally moved, slow and deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. He reached for a glass on the nearby table, poured himself a drink, and took a sip without a word. Every movement was controlled, confident, and unerringly casual, as though he had a place in this home that James didn't even know existed. James's mind raced. He remembered the small signs over the past few weeks, the late messages on Lisa's phone, the unexplained absences, the odd excuses she had given. He had brushed them off at the time, unwilling to see the cracks forming in the life he had built. But now everything was undeniable. James wanted to ask questions, demanded answers, but the words got stuck in his throat. Every instinct told him that this was bigger than a simple misunderstanding. There was something calculated about the stranger's presence, something deliberate that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. His mind flashed through possibilities. Was it a friend of Lisa's? A stranger she had invited? Or was it something darker, something he couldn't yet see? Each thought only made the anger in his chest burn hotter, but the fear that followed immediately after kept him frozen, unsure of how to act next. Lisa finally spoke, her voice trembling but firm. She tried to explain, her words careful and measured, but James could see the hesitation, the guilt, and the truth she was trying to hide. It was clear that this was more than just a random encounter. Something had been happening behind his back, something he wasn't meant to see. His heart sank as the realization hit. He wasn't just dealing with a stranger in his home. He was facing secrets, betrayal, and choices that would change everything he thought he knew about his life. Outside, the night remained still, indifferent to the storm brewing inside the house. Every second stretched longer, the tension climbing higher, the sense of impending chaos almost unbearable. James knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. And as the stranger's calm gaze met his once more, he realized that the questions he had, the answers he needed, and the decisions he would soon face were only beginning. The truth was coming, and no one could stop it. James sank into the nearest chair, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a storm cloud. His mind wouldn't stop racing. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to demand answers, to confront Lisa and the stranger. Yet another part of him, cold, calculating, urged him to watch, to understand before reacting. He realized that his life, the one he had believed was orderly and predictable, was now filled with questions he had no answers for. Every familiar corner of the house suddenly felt alien, every shadow suspicious. Lisa moved closer, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to explain, but her words felt like a fragile thread stretched over a deep, dark chasm. James noticed the subtle signs, how she avoided eye contact with the stranger, the way she kept glancing at him as if weighing her next words carefully. It was clear there was more to this than a simple misunderstanding, but she wasn't ready to reveal it yet. The tension between them crackled like static electricity, each pause in the conversation heavy with unspoken truths and hidden motives. Meanwhile, the stranger leaned back in a chair opposite James, his expression calm yet unreadable. He wasn't defensive, didn't flinch, didn't appear intimidated by the storm swirling around him. That calmness unnerved James more than anger or fear ever could. Who was this man? How had he come into their home with such ease? And what was his connection to Lisa? Every question seemed more dangerous than the last, and James could feel the threads of control slipping from his hands. As he tried to piece together the puzzle, memories of the past few weeks came flooding back. The late-night calls, the unexplained absences, the strange secrecy in Lisa's behavior. Each memory now felt like a clue, a piece of a larger, more complicated picture. James realized that the stranger's presence was not a coincidence. Something had been brewing long before tonight, something calculated and deliberate. His anger surged again, but it was mixed with a sharp edge of fear. Fear of what he didn't yet understand, fear of what Lisa might have been hiding, fear of the unknown that now filled his home. Across the room, Lisa's expression changed, a flicker of emotion crossing her face before she masked it with calm. James could sense her inner turmoil, the struggle between honesty and self-preservation. He wanted to press her, demand the truth, but he knew that forcing her hand now could make everything explode in ways he couldn't control. The stranger's steady gaze was a reminder that he wasn't just dealing with a domestic conflict. There was a third force in the room, one that could shift the balance at any moment. Outside, the night seemed unusually quiet, almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. The house, once a safe haven, had become a stage for secrets, tension, and confrontation. Every footstep, every glance, every subtle gesture carried meaning. James felt trapped in the eye of a storm that had been building long before he realized it. A storm that threatened to uncover hidden betrayals and expose truths he wasn't sure he was ready to face. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but deep down he knew the night was far from over. Questions remained unanswered, emotions unresolved, and the sense of impending revelation hung thick in the air. Whatever came next, it would change everything: relationships, trust, and the very life James thought he knew. The real conflict was just beginning, and no one in the room was safe from its consequences. James felt the room shrinking around him, the walls closing in with every heartbeat. His mind was a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and suspicion. The stranger's calm demeanor was infuriating, almost mocking, as if he understood the chaos he had caused better than James ever could. Every muscle in James's body was tense, ready to act, yet restrained by the weight of uncertainty. One wrong move could ignite a confrontation that might change everything. Lisa's face was pale, her eyes darting between James and the stranger. For a moment, she looked like the person James had married, but then a flicker of something unrecognizable passed through her expression. Fear, guilt, maybe regret. James wanted to ask her everything, demanded answers, but the words stuck in his throat. He could feel the tension vibrating in the air, thick and suffocating. The stranger took another slow sip of his drink, unbothered, yet every movement seemed intentional, as if he knew exactly how to push James to the edge without touching him. James's mind raced back to small, subtle signs he had ignored before. Lisa's whispered phone conversations late at night, the sudden changes in her schedule, the way she sometimes looked guilty without explanation. Each memory now felt like a warning, a clue that tonight would not be ordinary. And now, in his living room, everything he had ignored, brushed aside, or dismissed had converged into one undeniable reality. There was a secret, and it was bigger than he had imagined. The stranger finally spoke. His voice calm but carrying an edge that made James's skin crawl. He didn't introduce himself, didn't apologize, didn't explain why he was there. His words were careful, almost measured, yet each syllable seemed designed to make James doubt everything he thought he knew. James's hands curled into fists. The instinct to lash out, to demand answers, to confront him physically, was strong, but a quieter, sharper voice inside warned him that this wasn't just about anger. It was about control, about understanding what he had stumbled into before it was too late. Lisa tried to intervene, but her voice trembled, betraying the strain she was under. She wanted to explain, to calm James, to make him see reason, but the words faltered, and the tension in the room spiked. James could feel the storm rising within him, but the stranger's unwavering composure made him pause. He realized that this wasn't just a personal conflict anymore. It was a test, a trap, a confrontation that had been set up long before he even stepped inside with the woman he thought he could trust. The air seemed to thicken with each passing second. Every glance, every subtle gesture, every unspoken word carried weight. James's pulse raced as he tried to anticipate the next move, unsure who was truly in control. Himself, Lisa, or the stranger who had infiltrated his home and now held the balance of power. Fear, anger, and anticipation collided, building a tension so sharp it felt almost tangible, like electricity in the air. And then, just as James was about to speak, to demand the truth or confront the stranger, a sudden noise from upstairs shattered the fragile silence. The sound was small, almost dismissible, but in that charged atmosphere, it felt like a signal, a warning, a prelude to something inevitable. James froze, his instincts screaming that the night was far from over. Everything was about to come to a head, and nothing in the room, or in his life, would ever be the same. James's heart skipped a beat as the sound from upstairs echoed again, sharper this time, like someone or something was moving purposefully in the shadows. He turned toward Lisa, who flinched, her eyes widening in panic. The stranger, however, remained seated, calm as ever, a faint smirk forming on his lips. That small expression sent a chill down James's spine. How could anyone stay so composed when the air was thick with betrayal, fear, and tension? It didn't feel like a simple intrusion anymore. It felt orchestrated. James slowly rose, muscles tense, every nerve on alert. "Who's up there?" he demanded, his voice low but firm. Lisa's lips trembled, and she looked like she was about to say something, but instead she shook her head. "It's nothing, just the house settling," she said, though her tone betrayed her. James could see the hesitation, the way her hands twisted together nervously. Something wasn't right. She was hiding something, something bigger than the stranger in his living room. Suddenly, the stranger spoke again. His voice smooth, deliberate, and unervingly precise. "You think you understand the situation, James. But you don't. There's more to this than you've been told. And more than you're ready to see." James's fists clenched at his sides, and his pulse quickened. What did he mean? How could this man know so much? And why was he in James's house in the first place? The calm, almost taunting tone made James wonder if the stranger had planned this encounter from the very beginning. Lisa's face drained of color as she finally broke the silence. "James, you need to listen. You're missing something crucial. This isn't just about me or him. It's about someone else." Her voice cracked slightly, the urgency unmistakable. James froze, confused, a knot of anxiety forming in his chest. Someone else. Who else could be involved in this mess? Every instinct screamed that this revelation would change everything he thought he knew about his marriage and his home. The stranger's smirk widened slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Exactly. You've been blind to it all. And tonight, everything comes to light." He took another measured sip of his drink, his gaze never leaving James. James's mind raced. Who else could be part of this? And why had they chosen tonight to reveal themselves? The sense of a trap, carefully set and long in the making, pressed down on him. Then, the creaking upstairs intensified, followed by the faint sound of footsteps approaching the staircase. James felt a surge of adrenaline, a mixture of fear and rage. The presence of another unknown figure in his house, someone moving freely while he was trapped in this tense confrontation, escalated the stakes beyond anything he could have imagined. He realized that this was no longer just a confrontation with his wife or the stranger. It had become a battle for control, truth, and survival inside his own home. Lisa stepped closer to James, her voice urgent, almost a whisper. "Whatever happens next, be careful. You don't know what you're dealing with." Her words sent a shiver down his spine. James's eyes darted between her, the stranger, and the staircase, his mind spinning with questions and worst-case scenarios. Every second stretched longer, and the tension in the room felt unbearable, electric with the weight of secrets, deception, and the unknown. And as the footsteps drew closer, the stranger leaned back, his smirk unwavering, almost as if he were enjoying the chaos unfolding before him. James knew one thing with certainty. The night was far from over, the real danger had only just begun, and whatever, or whoever, was coming upstairs could change everything in an instant. The footsteps on the staircase stopped suddenly, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. James's eyes darted toward the sound, heart hammering in his chest. He could see the stranger leaning slightly forward, almost savoring the moment. Lisa's hands shook as she clutched his arm, her eyes pleading for him to stay calm, but James knew calm was a luxury he couldn't afford. Whoever or whatever was upstairs had changed everything. A figure emerged from the shadows at the top of the staircase. James's breath caught. It wasn't a burglar, it wasn't a friend, someone he recognized but couldn't immediately place. His mind raced, trying to understand the connection. And then it hit him. It was Mark, his business partner, the man he had trusted for years. But why was Mark in his house at this hour, unannounced, and clearly in on whatever had been unfolding tonight? The room seemed to shrink further, the tension unbearable, the betrayal cutting deeper than James had thought possible. The stranger's smirk widened. "I told you, James, you've been blind to it all. Everything happening tonight was meant to bring you here, to see the truth yourself." James's anger boiled over. "The truth? What truth? Why is Mark here? And why did you come into my home?" The stranger didn't answer immediately, letting the silence stretch, making every second feel like an eternity. Lisa stepped forward, finally breaking her silence. "James. It's all connected. Mark, he's been manipulating things behind your back for months. The stranger here, he's not just a random man. He's been working with Mark to test you, to see how far you'd go when pushed to the edge." James's mind reeled. Everything, the late messages, the absences, the secretive behavior. It all made sense now, but it didn't lessen the sting of betrayal. Mark's expression was calm, almost cold. "I didn't expect to be caught like this," he said, voice even. "But yes, everything you've seen tonight was part of a larger plan. And now it's time to make a choice, James. What you do next will decide everything." James felt trapped between rage, disbelief, and the urgent need to protect what remained of his home, his marriage, and his dignity. The stranger finally stood, moving closer, a quiet menace in every step. "Decide quickly," he warned. "The consequences are already in motion." James's chest tightened. He realized that the confrontation wasn't just about betrayal, it was about control, trust, and survival. His mind raced through all the possibilities, trying to predict the outcome, but he knew there was no simple solution. Then, just as James stepped forward to confront Mark, Lisa's voice cut through the tension, calm yet resolute. "Wait, there's something you both don't know. I've been protecting you, James, not hiding secrets from Mark or him." Her gaze met the stranger's and Mark's simultaneously. "I've known about the plan, but my choice has always been to protect our family, even if it means letting the truth come in pieces." James froze, torn between disbelief and a glimmer of understanding. Before anyone could respond, Lisa pressed a button on a small device she had been holding hidden in her hand. Suddenly, lights flickered, a hidden recording started, revealing everything: conversations, manipulations, even the stranger and Mark's planning sessions. The evidence was undeniable, exposing betrayals while simultaneously showing Lisa's careful interventions to prevent worse consequences. James's mind spun as the layers of deception fell away. He felt the anger, the betrayal, and the relief all at once. But just as he was about to process everything, the stranger smirked and whispered something that sent a chill down his spine. "You think it's over, James? This was only the beginning." The room went silent again, but the weight of that final, unexpected twist hung in the air, leaving James and the audience questioning what else lay hidden beneath the surface, and what the next move would be. James sank into the nearest chair, exhaustion and relief washing over him like a wave. The tension that had gripped the house for hours finally began to ease, though the weight of what had happened still pressed heavily on his chest. Mark stood silently, finally realizing that the evidence captured by Lisa left him with no leverage. The stranger, too, seemed to shift, his confident composure replaced by a reluctant acknowledgement that his plan had failed. The chaos of the night was over, but its impact lingered, leaving every person in the room forever changed. Lisa moved closer to James, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. "I know this was hard," she said softly, her voice steady now. "I didn't want you to find out this way, but I couldn't let things go any further. Everything I did tonight, it was to protect us." James felt a mixture of gratitude and lingering doubt. He had questioned her loyalty, her honesty, even her intentions, but seeing the recordings, the careful interventions, and the way she had maneuvered to prevent disaster, he understood. Her choices had saved him, saved their marriage, and ultimately exposed the people who had sought to manipulate them both. Mark's expression hardened, but there was no fight left in him. He finally spoke, voice low and tense. "You've won tonight, James. But don't think this ends everything. There are always consequences. And people like me don't give up easily." James didn't respond. He realized that while tonight's confrontation had resolved the immediate threat, vigilance would always be necessary. Trust, once broken, had to be rebuilt carefully, and the lessons of betrayal would not be forgotten. The stranger moved toward the door, giving James one last look. "Consider this a warning," he said. "Plans like these don't just happen once. Be ready." And with that, he left, leaving an eerie silence in his wake. James glanced at Lisa, and for the first time in hours, they allowed themselves to breathe. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, but also permanent proof that hidden secrets, manipulation, and deceit could infiltrate even the safest places. James finally looked around, processing everything that had occurred. The night had been filled with anger, betrayal, fear, and suspense, but it had also revealed hidden strengths, resilience, and the importance of vigilance. He realized that the trust between him and Lisa had been tested in unimaginable ways, yet it had endured. He had learned not only about the people around him but about himself, how he reacted under pressure, how quickly he could judge, and how deeply he valued honesty and loyalty. Lisa squeezed his hand, and James felt a quiet reassurance. "We'll rebuild," she said, a gentle smile on her face. "And this time nothing will be hidden. We'll face everything together." James nodded, understanding that the events of the night, though painful, had brought clarity. The danger had passed, but the lessons and the strength gained would guide them moving forward. As dawn broke, light spilling into the house, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. The chaos of the night was behind them, but it had reshaped their lives, leaving them stronger, wiser, and more united. Betrayal, deception, and suspense had tested them, but in the end, truth and trust prevailed. The house, once a place of tension and uncertainty, now felt like a home again, one built not just on walls and furniture, but on understanding, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between James and Lisa. The story ended not with violence or revenge, but with a quiet victory, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal and danger, honesty, courage, and love could restore balance and bring resolution. Yet, in the shadows of that night, one lingering question remained. Who, if anyone, would challenge them next? The answer wasn't immediate, but for now, peace had returned, and that was enough.